now. Okay, this is Rocco Pisto. I'm president of the Michigan Watercolor Society. And today we're joined by Marilynn Derwenkus. And she's going to be sharing her thoughts today on art and people that she's following and where art is taking her today. And move to the next slide here if I can. There we go. For those of you that don't know Marilynn, she's been a Michigan watercolor member through the years since she was in college, I just found out. And this picture here is the last time I think you may have been in Michigan, Marilynn, but it was at the chair exhibition that we had a few years ago at the Black Box Gallery, where we brought together past Michigan watercolor chairs and trying to catch up with what they're doing in their work. And we had, I don't know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 or 9, actually 10 artists worked there, and a couple are no longer with us, but we were able to bring some of their work as well. So it was great to see Marilynn. I think that's probably the first time I had met you. I've heard of you, but I was gone for 20 years as well. So I didn't really, let me just bring someone else here online. I really didn't know you at all until that chair exhibition. And the thing that I found very interesting was that, you know, some of your fellow students, some of your students that you had taught previously, encouraged them to be in Michigan watercolor, came to the reception, and it was really heartwarming to see the mentorship that you gave these people and how much they appreciated it. And I said, you know, we have to stay in contact.
Connected to anything, so it's
resources that you provide and the experience that you provide were really important. So again, thank you for accepting this challenge to talk to us today. And just a little bit about Marilynn. She's an American artist, an educator. She's a Lilly Fellow. She's part of the National Watercolor Society, the Watercolor Society of Indiana, Northwest, Alabama, Georgia, Pennsylvania. Obviously, with Michigan Watercolor, she's a past chairman. She's a signature and Great Lakes Fellow with us now, that we started that a couple of years ago, and some other things. She got her fine arts degree, or BFA, at Wayne State, got her master's at Wayne State in education, and then went on to get an MFA at the University of Chicago. And then in her career, she was an associate professor at Ball State University in Muncie, Indiana, since 1988, and co-directed Art in Italy with Ball State University as well. So just a little highlight about Marilynn. Yeah, let's see if I can get this to go here. Come on. There we go. So with that, Marilynn, it's all yours.
Okay, thanks for the introduction, Rocky. So I hope I will say some things that will ring a bell or make you get excited about painting all the time, okay? So this first page is just kind of to introduce maybe some things about the overview of this presentation. And so the two things that I wanted to underscore would be my goals. Well, first of all, I wanted to remind you about the 4 parts of a work of art: subject, content, form, technique. Subject answers the question, what is it? Content answers the question, what does it mean? And I'm going to change from my original word because it's blocked here. Well, maybe I can find it. Content, the next one is subject, content, form. There's the word. It's covered by some sign on my TV, on my monitor. Anyway, form means how is it organized, and last is technique, and that means how was it done. Technique is where most people begin by thinking about subject, making an apple, trying to make an apple look like an apple. But then I think when they start, decide with your going to take a class or study at a university, first thing you bump into is technique, how to do things. But sometimes we forget there are 4 parts. And when you make a work of art, usually all four parts are included, but one may be emphasized more than another. Okay? So somebody has their speaker on and
And I'm
they-
trying to mute everybody but you too, so.
okay. All right. I just thought if everybody turned theirs off, it would be easy for you. All right. So let me go back to what I was starting to say. So anyway, I've listed 4 goals to learn how to paint again. That's an important issue because in 2019, I fell and I broke my 3 parts of my body, my hip, my right arm, and my right wrist. It's okay about the hip. That was no problem. But I lost my ability to hold a brush even. And so I had to teach myself how to paint. So part of my presentation is about finally getting to the paintings that came out of my 2 years of experimenting, trying to teach myself how to paint. And I used the magic of watercolor. Those of you that may have studied with me may recall that handout. I think I wrote it when I had occasional teaching assignments at Wayne State. All right. So then goal 2 is create unique paintings. That's something that emerged gradually and has become the most significant issue in my work. 3rd goal, seek answers to the big question. How do artists create great art? And ever since I was a college student, I studied with Mary Jane Bickler as a watercolor professor, and she was one of the founders of this watercolor society. And she told us time after time, she thought that the goal that we all should assume was to work towards creating things that are great, so our work might be selected for museum collections. It's not about just selling work. For some people, selling is very important. I don't want to negate that. That's because we need to survive. And if you're going to be an artist, you want to sell what you make. I was fortunate enough to be able to teach. And so therefore I had a job and some income. And so selling my work, though I did sell it and I did have shows, was not the goal in my life. So I have a few years left in my life. It's become a very prominent thing, and this project will address that. Okay, I think we can move slide 1.
May take a second delay here. There we go.
Good. So, oh, what do I do? It's not on my screen. Thank you. So this page, I had so many things I wanted to show you. This is about 8 or 9 images, 9, I guess. And they're part of this 2 years of work. The upper right corner, sorry, the upper left corner has these 3 little blobs. I did those for months and months and months using the magic of watercolor, these little experiments, just like you had to do if you had that assignment in my class. They were about 3 by 4 inches or 2 by 4. And here I'm trying to learn how to make a wash. I used to be able to make these wonderful, flat, flawless washes. Can't do them anymore because my hand-eye coordination is not there. So I worked and worked on them, and also the backwash, and you see that there. I'm not going to talk about each of these. I'll point out a few things. So these are examples of the more advanced experiments that I did, which, by the way, I have scheduled an exhibition of my work for 2023 in Muncie. I'm sorry, not in Muncie, that's where Ball State is. But instead here where I live in Nashville, Tennessee. And so I'm making even these small works will hopefully be included, the ones that are a little bit beyond those 3 corner experiments there. Okay, so some of these are, let's see, the dark blue one, that one has a painted ground, and then I added those two rectangles were collaged on. The white marks were the results of watercolor pens. I have purchased a lot of new supplies to play with, and I'll mention them along the way. The upper right corner has a little piece of collage in it, upper right corner of the upper right painting, okay? Stripes I love, been using them for years. They'll be in these presentations. In the lower left corner, bottom row, it's kind of teal background with black outlines around forms. Teal blue is a new color for me. Black outlines is something I don't usually use. So that was kind of experiment. It's a little bigger one, and it's more like a finished painting. I guess I won't spend any more time. Next slide. This is my first painting after the fall, a first real painting. And I finally said to myself one day, you know, it's time to paint. So I got out, my favorite size of paper is 11 by 30, a full sheet cut in half the long way. And I painted, I didn't pour this. I painted the very center of this work with wet and wet technique. And I step back and I go, whoa, this is going to be a painting. But I liked all the white paper. So I got out a roll of artist tape and blocked off some area so that I had like little postage stamp paintings and a bigger rectangle. And I proceeded, and it was just really a lot of fun. The stripes are in this work as well as a group. So because this, let's see, what messages did I tell you? Let me turn my page, because I underlined a few things that I wanted to be sure to say. Nothing on this page. Okay, you can go on to the next slide. All right, so if you remembered the painting of mine, it had a lot of rectangles in it that I created by using masking tape. One of my heroes is David Sally. David Sally is an artist that I became aware of when I did my MFA at the University of Chicago in 1986 to 88, I think it was. And during those years, I didn't have a lot of money. I didn't even have enough money to finish going to school for 2 years. Some of you know my husband had MS, so things were not very easy for us in terms of our finances. But I went there and I believed that somehow I would find a scholarship. And I kept looking and I didn't find one. I started anyway. And when the faculty found out that I was ambitious and hardworking, they awarded me some funding so that I was assisted with my studies. The other important thing that happened is I found out about David Sally. I also got a job at the Renaissance Society, which was the name of the gallery at the university. And through that job, they were having their first show was about people who had studied at Cal Arts, and David Sally had studied there. So, and the gallery director talked to me at length about him and his work. And I also visited the MCA, Museum of Contemporary Art in Chicago. There was a one-person show of Sally's work. There was a small room with video presentation, an interview with Sally. I attended that, and the critic asked David Sally, so what did his paintings mean? I'm sure you're looking at this image and saying, what is this all about? And I think everyone asked that about the paintings from this era of his work. So his question was, so what does it mean? And he said, mean? It doesn't mean anything. And I thought, oh, he's just an arrogant ass. He doesn't want to tell us. It's got to mean something. You don't make something like this without any meaning. So now that I'm doing this project of trying to teach myself how to paint and trying to work towards really strong work, I decided I better do some reading. My eyes are in bad shape because I have calcium deposits in my eyes. I can still see, but it's very slow reading. But I'm bound and determined to do this. So I've looked up David Sally, and I have a book where the same critic that had interviewed and asked him what his work meant wrote in there. And I looked and looked and looked, trying to be able to quote it. And I'm sorry, I couldn't find it. But anyway, the critic's name is, oh goodness, I guess I didn't write that down. Well, that's okay. I'll think of it. And if you're interested, write me and I'll send you his name. But anyway, he questioned it again in the book that I have, saying that he thought that was one area that was difficult because he refused to talk about what his paintings meant. So I guess maybe he was telling the truth when he said it doesn't have any meaning. So let's just look at this painting for a second with a few thoughts. Okay, so what we're seeing is a lot of rectangles, which I've used again and again in my work. So it looks like we're looking at a guy looking in a mirror, but instead of seeing him, we're seeing some Swiss cheese, I think. That's what I called it. And then there's a woman portrait, a bear wearing clothes on a bike or a tightrope. And then the third panel, the one on the right, is a Cezanne-like composition, but this time on its side. So he's daring. He combines all sorts of things. If you're not familiar, you need to look him up. I think of him as probably the most important painter of the 21st century. So look at my words: strange combination of imagery, content with a big question mark, but utmost technical skill. If you're going to be an article, you better have that. You got to find a way. Make sure you can make what you want with a great deal of skill. The way he's applied the paint, the way he organized the page, even the choice of subject. I do think this painting really addresses all four parts of a work of art. Okay, next slide. And I saw that painting in New York. I actually saw it. Okay, so this is now like the second painting that I did. After the first one, I was like all excited. I made a painting that looked like a painting, not an experiment that looked like not very skillfully executed in any way. So I did this one. It's called Thanks to Romeo and Scott. That's my son and his wife who sent me a bouquet of flowers for Valentine's Day. And it sat on my dining room table. I photographed it so many times. Up close. Flowers are so beautiful that they're kind of, I think, boring to paint, because everyone paints a bouquet of flowers that looks like a bouquet of flowers stuck in a vase. And I think I wanted to concentrate on the flowers. And so I set up this painting, and the lines in this vase, the stripes, are the Venetian blinds in the dining room. The house I live in has Venetian blinds in every room. So I see the inside and the outside in a sort of strange way because of them. So they have become part of my painting. I think, let's see what I underlined things in my sheet of this. Aha, the very first one. Avoiding the mere beauty of flowers, of the bouquet. I put flowers in there when we first wrote it. I said, no, it's got to be the bouquet. That's the problem, is painting a bouquet. If you can find a way to make it unique and different, it's great. Then you get lots of points for that, okay? And maybe more dollars. Right? And then the last one is noticing the unnoticed, the Venetian blinds. Those are two, I think, important observations that I included in this painting. Okay, next slide. It's sort of funny to talk like this, and you can't jump in and talk and ask a question. But maybe you could make a little note to yourself, a word, and then at the end, when there's time for questions, would be able to address it. All right, this one is titled A New World. All right, so I like to stop so you can just look at them, but I better not, because I have 11 slides to show.
You're doing fine, Marilyn.
Am I? Okay. All right. So on this one, if you would look at the very first blip, part of the,
Goal
thank you. I don't have my glasses on.
to create
Very-
unique
this
and
one.
different paintings.
Yep. Okay, I got them now. Yeah, because as I said before, the creation of those three words, different, unique. What's the other one? It'll pop up soon somewhere along the way. Those three words is what I seek. Okay. And so this one is a painting that I started early on after the fall, and I covered the whole page with first a wash and then lines. It's like stripes, but this time they crisscross each other. And I used teal and fuchsia or magenta, one of those two colors. And then bad things happened because and I used tape. Okay, I taped it off. So the first color that went on was teal. And then if you can see it close enough, you'll notice that drips got under the tape. And so it was a messy painting. So I put it aside and I thought it was a failure. But then later, because I got some new supplies, I got these watercolor pens, black, white, but also colors. But I have only been using pretty much the white and the black. And I began to turn it into a texture that was significant by circling them, making a circle around the blob, like it was important, not that it was a mistake. Okay. Okay, so that once that started, then one day I put it aside and I thought, maybe I could add some collage. And artists never throw anything away. So I have like a garbage bag of scraps of things, shapes that I've cut out for one reason or another. I make Valentine's and Easter cards, shaped cards, and send those. So I have the scraps. And so maybe if you look carefully, you're probably going to see shapes like, oh, that looks like the edge of a heart. I see it right where the black dot is in the middle. So I got those out and thought about applying them. So that was a kind of unique thing about this painting, to do a collage by adding collage of white paper over a painted painting. And then I proceeded with some additional additions, the black circles and stripes and so forth. Okay.
Marilyn, I have a question for you.
Yes.
So, for someone that's just starting out in watercolor, for example, I mean, they are looking at things that resonates with them, like flowers or, a house, architecture, landscape. But
Right.
what do you think it takes to kind of go outside that box to create the kind of things you're doing? Is it learning more about art history, or following people that, interest you?
No, I have the answer. So this morning, I've been practicing what I was going to say today, and I realized that one of the topics I failed to address was the importance of negative shapes. And I remember that when I was a freshman in college, I had to take this class called Design Fundamentals. And I learned, it was like a foreign language to me. I learned so much. I memorized everything. I didn't understand it, but I memorized it. I could write a good exam, so I got a good grade. But it wasn't until a couple of years after that class, I was in an oil painting class, and I was working on a landscape painting, and I had these trees in it, and I realized the negative spaces were so wonderful between the branches of a tree. And so when I realized that really experiencing that negative spaces are real, they're there. We just they're not attended to often. But if you want to do abstract work, all you got to do is pay attention to the negative shapes and think about them, the intervals between things, the kind of shapes. So we have that in this painting with the collage shapes that are have cut out parts to them. We can see the kind of shapes become much more interesting. Many of them are hearts as I now look at them, or Easter eggs, I'm saying too. Um, so I think that's one of the keys is paying attention to negative spaces if you want to work abstract. You
Great.
got to make the negative space as beautiful as the positive shapes. And when you do that, you have to make changes because sometimes they're just kind of boring.
Well, I
Okay,
was
so
always
begin.
told you have to leave the white of the paper somewhere in the painting because it's just dramatic against the washes.
Mhm.
And again, that's part of that negative space, I guess you could call it.
Right, right. I think that's true. I never thought of it in that way. And Mary Jane Bickler didn't teach me that.
So
But
I've got a question from Kate. She's curious about what brand of watercolor paint you use and brand of watercolor paper.
Mhm. Okay. Well, I like very much Daniel Smith, and I use a lot of Daniel Smiths. They have so many colors. Oh my gosh, they just so many colors. But I also use Cheap Joe's. Um, I don't like Winsor Newton. I did a lot of traveling to Europe, and therefore, when I would go there to teach or paint or show my work, I liked to be using American products. So Daniel Smith was definitely that. Okay. I also like Sennelier, Sennelier. I don't know how to say that French word very well. Um, but
And
uh,
paper?
paper, my favorite is Fabriano. And Mary Jane Bickler, if you know Mary Jane Bickler, she took students to Europe, Italy. And I've been to the factory in Europe. Every time I went there with students, and I went 12 times, I would take them there to see how it was made. So that's my favorite paper. But I also learned over the years that every brand is a little different in the amount of sizing and how it's made. So I can say Fabriano is good for cold press and rough, but hot press is better with arches. But I don't, as a generally, I mean, I use those papers. I also like very much like the handmade paper from Indiana, Twin Rack. I thought I wouldn't be able to think of the word, and I like it very much. But I would lived in Indiana, so I could take my students there too. But I also could go there and buy paper that might be seconds with a little flaw, and it's a little cheaper. But you can't buy that over the phone. You have to go there, pick it out. Okay, is that it?
Yes.
All right, next slide. I want you to know this whole presentation was put up by a young woman that works here at our house. I live with my daughter and she has twins, 8 years old. So she's there and works with them, and a little bit of time for me. She set this all up. So I think it looks wonderful. All right, this one is titled Another Tennessee Landscape. So I live in Tennessee now, and I moved here and I don't really like it here. It is very beautiful here. The people are very nice. There's not much art stuff, visual art. It's a music city. Okay. So I'm sort of sad about that. I lived in Chicago after I retired, and I'm used to being able to go to the museums, for goodness sakes. They have something called a museum here, but it has no permanent collection. They just bring in shows all the time. So I think a museum has to have a permanent collection that you can always go back and look at your favorite painting. It doesn't have it. All right, so this painting, Another Tennessee Landscape, was started before I fell. And it's a poured painting, which means that I mixed up my paint in a paper cup, water and pigment, and then I poured it I poured it through paper filters, and I used paper towels, I used Kleenex, and I would pour the paint through there and leave the paper, that filter on the top of the watercolor paper until it was dry or nearly dry. If you take it off when it's wet, then you disturb the textures that are attaching themselves to the watercolor paper. So the textures on poured paintings are really fun. Kleenex makes really good textures, okay? But you can't use Kleenex with chemicals in it. This would be just the cheapest Kleenex you can buy. All right, so anyway, I poured this. I cut shapes before I started, kind of hilly-like forms, poured it through, let it dry overnight, lifted off the papers. Well, actually, usually I poured in the morning, and by the time I went to bed, I'd taken off the paper, the filters. And then the hard part begins, and I think I wrote that somewhere. Yes, unique textures. I didn't turn my page. Well, let's skip down to the bottom one. This is what I circled. Courage is required to proceed, yet the solution requires the most new and different route. Okay. So when you take all the papers, those filters off, you look at it and you go, oh my gosh, the textures are so wonderful. I can't do another thing to it. Of course, you have to. You have to. You can't leave it like that. And so it takes a long time, and you have to have courage to proceed. Okay. And gradual happenings. I always tell students the first thing you have to do is look at what you got. If you have half painted area, half white paper showing, because for some reason everything you put down doesn't attach itself, because I'm not gluing or taping or anything. They're just sitting there, so they don't make contact, the two papers, with each other. As you pour, then you're not going to get anything. So wherever you see black, for instance, those were little white spots. Okay. All right. And then there's just so many different things you can do. You can pour a second time. You can change the relationship of parts of the repetitions of colors by more pours. You can also muddy up your colors with more pours. So you have to make some choices there. The more experience you have as a painter, the more ideas you probably have as you look at the outcome. Okay, next slide.
Well, question for you, Marilyn, just on the
Sure.
paper size, you've kind of standardized on this 11 by 30 inch.
Yeah.
How did that come about?
Well, it just came about because I liked the idea of long, skinny ones. So I've been doing it for a lot of years, not recent, just recently. But now I do it because I can sit down and reach the top of the paper.
Okay. No, I mean, I work with all different sizes, and I am fond of this size a lot in my work. So I just wanted to see what reasoning you may have, because I use the rolled paper, so I'm always cutting to fit the sizes I'm looking for. So
I see. No, I buy standard size paper, although Twin Rocker, you can order whatever you want.
Okay.
So, I've done different. Okay, so this one is called An Unexpected Visitor. And this painting, the most important thing to know is this painting was my first try. Okay, this is the way it looked in the beginning, and I didn't like it. So I washed off sun twice. I did that. And now the painting does not exist. And I plan to repaint it. I did want you to see it. I think it is, turns out now I realize that that first try was pretty successful.
it was. It's gorgeous.
So anyway, this blue bird came to visit me. He settled on the windowsill in my bathroom. And I thought, oh, I think I have to paint that visitor. Okay, next slide.
Was that a cardinal?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, yes. This one, I kind of like this painting. I made it for someone who's getting married. It was a wedding gift. And so the couple liked to go fly fishing. And so I decided I would make them a painting like that for their home to kind of remember their pre-married age, premarital days, when they would go up north to northern Michigan and go fishing. So I did a combination of things here. I tried to make the fish, I had to look them up. these are trout, rainbow trout. I had to look them up and figure out how they were different than other fish. But then I had a whole paper, the whole page was covered with pourings. And then I decided to work on top of that. It looks like I have white paper. So before I poured, I put tape down, then I poured over, I described the process
Right.
over the filters. And then I had to go back and forth. The very center has all the pourings through it. I just painted many layers over that.
And
Let's see.
You can still see the transparency coming through.
Right. Yeah, I use transparent watercolor. Although one of my supplies that I recently bought is some gouache. I have only used white gouache in the past, but now I got some color, and I'm hoping, I haven't really explored that yet. Haven't gotten to that.
Did you say gouache?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh no, I haven't been turning my page.
If anyone has questions, just put it in the chat window and I'll get them asked for you.
Okay, next slide. I'm turning my pages this time to stay in tune. Okay, this one's called Never Ending. The last painting was a wedding gift. This one is a wedding gift for the two brides were sisters. Okay, and this one was painted first. This one emphasizes circles and rings, and that's why it's called Never Ending. The circle is never ending, and hopefully their marriage is never ending. And then the last addition on this painting was to add all those little scrapes, like Venetian blinds again. So it's sort of funny. And also I have the initials of the bride and the groom, Jason and Allison. Can you find the A and the J right in the middle?
And it works in the composition.
Well, you try to make it work. That's the key. Okay, next. Oh my goodness, what have we got here? This is something I would like to spend a little bit of time talking about. So as I got more and more involved in painting, I realized I needed to do some research. I needed to find out, how do artists make good paintings? So let's study a couple people. And I chose early on, Julie Dawson, a Michigan artist. Many of you probably know her. Julie Dawson contacted me. She had been a student of mine for 16 years. That's longer than most people go to school. Anyway, she was in my class a lot of years, and she had never painted before. She came to my class, and she did a lot of really wonderful work and continues to do many, many things that are spinning off from all these wonderful watercolors she did early on and continues to do. Anyway, she sent me, Brian Rutenberg wrote an article. She sent me a copy of it. I had never heard of him. He's an, excuse me, he's an artist from North Carolina. And he paints with oil paint, very large oil paintings, and his colors and surface of his paintings are just incredible. So the Birmingham Bloomfield Artists Association recently, and I don't know what that means, had a show of his work. So you might have seen his work. He has written several books. I bought the first one after I read this article. The article was about a lot of things that I liked. When COVID started, I was making paintings about COVID. I felt it was my responsibility as an artist to make some paintings about what was going on in our world at this time. I've always done that. You know, when presidents have been impeached and changed presidents or whatever is going on, I sometimes decide I have to paint it. I just need to make a record of this as part of my art record. So I decided to, well, I was telling you about his work. So I bought the first book and I read it cover to cover and I loved it. The book was only $15, had very little colored plates, mostly black and white. And it was a paperback. And so that's why it was only $15. But what I read, the title of it is Clear Seeing Space, Place, not space, place, clear. And I think of the words as being very separate entities, not a sentence. Clear seeing place. And then after that, in small letters on his title, is studio visits. And I thought it meant people were visiting his studio to see what he was doing. But I think it was things got clearer to him when he got to his studio. That's what how I interpreted because of the way he spaced those words on the title page. So I started to tell you, but I guess I started to tell you and I left the thought, is that I felt that I had a connection sort of with him because he was from the South and I now live in the South. His wife is a doctor. My daughter is a doctor. His wife is a doctor at, oh, don't tell me you're going to forget this now, a hospital in New York where my daughter did a fellowship. So there was all these, I can't think of the name, but it'll come to me. Anyway, the article he wrote was about how artists' lives were catching up with COVID, or COVID was catching up with artists' lives. He described how he had his wife and he decided they couldn't live together any longer. That's what COVID has done. It's changed the way we live our lives. And so they had a place in the city and a place outside of the city somewhere. So he and the kids lived at home and she lived somewhere else. Well, occasionally she came home. He would meet her at the car, wrap her up in a shower curtain and carry her into the house. I thought, wow, that's the image of doing that. And my daughter, when she comes home from work, well, she stopped doing that, but she would come home. She would go and take off her clothes in the garage, run upstairs and take a shower before she talked to any of us in the family. So in some ways, she was trying to protect the connection, the family coming in contact with each other for fear of catching the COVID. So our house is still kind of like that. My daughter wears a mask all the time, even now. And we all have been vaccinated, the children and me and Joy. So it's amazing about that illness, okay? But anyway, though, for all those reasons, that's what made me want to read the book after I read that article. Sorry about that long story. Okay, and then the next book, A Little Lost Time, I bought that one, is a bigger book and it's published by the gallery he shows at in New York. He shows in New York and in a number of other galleries throughout the country. I think he's a well-established artist now. I don't know how old he is. I was gonna guess, I won't guess. How about the second artist, Catherine Chang Lu? Well, I'm looking at this and saying, let's go on to the next slide, because I think it's a picture of their work, Catherine's and Brian's. Yes. Okay, so the painting on the left is a picture of Brian's work, and you can see the size, 62 by 44, and he does them much larger than that. I call them wall-sized paintings, and they just glow. Their color glows. He uses brilliant color and lots of darks, and the combination of those two things makes his work just glow in my mind. And I think as I look at it, that's what I'm seeing. So it's that quality that makes me like his work so much, because I have to keep asking myself, why do you like these people's work? Okay, and the other one is Catherine Chang Lu. Now, Catherine Lu, I have a book of hers somewhere, I cannot find it, that I own. And I tried to I looked her up online and I found a lot of pictures and information, but no titles. I don't think I can do what I did, copy it and put it on this in this program. I know her, so I did try to call her, and probably she's out of town or something. And she did just recently. I did it. She didn't call back. Anyway, that's her an example of her work. So she's a very abstract artist. And when I had a Lilly fellowship, it was the biggest fellowship I ever had in my life, $40,000 and 1 year off from teaching. And my project that got me this award was to investigate the development of content of where do ideas come from for the artists, for the visual artists. And so she was one of the artists. My grant, it provided me also funding for transportation to visit 7 artists. See if I can remember their names. Catherine Chang Liu, Alex Powers, Warren Taylor, someone in Carol Barnes, doing good. A girl that did work that I called sort of spiritual work. I don't think I can think of her name. And an artist that was in that artist, the one I just named was in Wisconsin. The other one, the next one is in New Mexico. There we go. And she was originally from Michigan. I cannot recall her name either. But anyway, so I really was jumping all over the place and learning so much with, and they were all different kinds of artists that I picked. They were all people I admired. And they were because they did different work, realistic, abstract, spiritual, political, what's the other one? Political and social themes, okay? So I learned a lot doing that, almost as much as I did when I was at the university. And it was through separate personal investigation. All of you need to look at grants. I don't know if there are any available anymore with the way things are going, but you should look at it. I had 2 from Michigan. You are in Michigan, and be sure to check those out. I had 3 from Indiana state. These are all straight from the government. Okay, next. So I'm saying, let's just look at this one for a minute.
That's
this is
awesome.
one of my favorites.
Yeah.
And it was an early on painting. You can tell by all the squares and taping off. This is fireworks. And this painting is a favorite because one of the things that's happened to me in these 2 years during COVID is that I had to find a way to become an artist again because of my problems with my body, but also because things are different because of COVID and we don't go anywhere. I haven't been out of my house at all, except to go to the doctor and for a ride to look at a landscape, to get out of the house a bit. So this one is about fireworks, and I've always painted fireworks. And I watched CNN television. They had fireworks on the 4th of July that lasted the entire day, because they went from city to city and showed the fireworks in different cities. And they also had music presentations as well. And so I came in touch with Ariel Speedwagon. I was familiar when I heard it. Now I play it all the time while I paint. I love it. So anyway, the fireworks painting. So let's look at this one. So I'm looking at the fireworks and I'm remembering all my past experiences when my kids were little and we went every single year to watch the fireworks with our best friends. And I always drew them, and I always then I eventually started taking pictures of them. So I'm sitting there, I'm going, I got my sketchbook out and I began to draw from the television. And then I got my camera out and photographed them after a while. And, I watched, they were on till 3:00 in the morning for me. And I didn't only watch them till 12 or 1:00, but anyway, a lot of fireworks. So I had all this material. I still have it. There will be more fireworks paintings eventually. So because I had painted them a lot, I remembered how to do it. And I felt I sort of did it. And I had little problems with one of the squares was crooked and I had to fix it. I think I even managed to fix it. I couldn't believe that it was crooked, but it was. So anyway, let's see what did I circle anything to remind you? It's called Fireworks Rediscovered. I guess that was the only thing I wanted. You could read those things, but I think that the painting sort of says it all.
Mhm.
Kind of like it. Okay, next. I guess I'm doing fine
You're doing great.
on time. All right, now this one is one that was inspired by Brian Rutenberg, his colors. I think that the surface in the green doesn't really match up to my desire, okay? And that's because I had a plan for it and I tried it and it didn't work. So what we're looking at is Lake Radnor, which is someplace here in Tennessee, in Nashville. Reflection of the water, and that's the picture, the one with the blue border, cobalt blue, is a picture that my 8-year-old grandson took for me. So we went to Lake Radnor together, but I don't get out and walk around. I don't walk around very good. I have to use a walker. So I stay in the car and draw and sketch and photograph. We parked right in front of the sign that says no parking, and that's where I stayed. These pictures are a little crooked, I see. Didn't even notice that. I may try to fix that. I've gotten pretty good at washing off and re-executing when I make mistakes. So I was starting to tell you. So in the painting on the right is a picture that I took from the inside of the car, looking out at the landscape. And I love the shape of the windows, those two kind of triangular shapes. And I thought that they worked pretty good together. But I really wanted something else to happen. And my plan was to make a line drawing. I painted a green wash, okay, with brush marks showing, all kinds of them. And then I thought I would make a drawing with white lines, a line drawing of the landscape from the pictures that I had taken. And I did it and it looked dreadful. So I washed it off and re-executed the green wash and felt that it kind of worked. And when I was painting, one of the early on discoveries, because my eyes are not so good, if I put white tape on top of the white watercolor paper, I can't see it. So I bought some colored tapes. I have some blue tape and some lavender tape, which I had set down on these and I kind of liked it. I was thinking about Rutenberg's work again. I said, no, don't use white. Put that color in there. So I think this painting needs a little more work, okay? Something happened as Kinsley is the name of the girl that comes and does. She photographs my work and then she puts all this stuff together. So, okay, do this, do this. She does it. She's a techie. She's going to be a nurse, so she looks after my pill bottle needs and crazy things, but also all the good stuff I like her to do. So when she photographed this, and then I said, oh, I need a copy. After she got this PowerPoint done, I felt I needed a copy that I could look at in order to do this presentation. When she did that and printed it out, the ink were getting low, and it printed with stripes over half of the painting on the green around the purple, around that purple frame. So it was like half yellow striped, and it matched this color of the water in the other image. And so I'm going to paint those in. I'm going to straighten out this wash. I'll flatten it out as much as I can, and then I'll apply some yellow stripes. And I can use gouache, and I can cover it all up, and it'll be just fine. So I'm all excited about solving the problem. So even when we do something we wish we hadn't, there is a way to solve it. I think I started the statement, and I don't know if I finished it, when I was a freshman in watercolor, and I declared that it was a difficult medium. I know I said that, but I didn't tell you that I thought there was nothing you could do to fix it. We didn't have scrubber brushes. We didn't, and I just bought those this year, 2 scrubber brushes. That's what you need if you want to lift the paint off. It's pretty good to get it off. And then you can re-execute things. And you got to carefully blot. You got to do a little bit at a time. You can't try to do the whole area if it's a big area like this. So I think I can fix this. All right.
Well,
Another thing?
and
Another
Marilyn,
thing?
you mentioned, and this is for the benefit of people on the call that, I know when I do initial washes, you're looking at it like, wow, this is going to be a magical painting. Then you go, where do I go from here? Because if I touch it, I may ruin it.
You
But
got it.
you've got to push through it, like you said, and solve the problem. And to make it work as a painting, not just, a few splashes and things. So I thought you made
So
that point.
that back in the old days when I was a freshman or a sophomore taking watercolor. So you had 2 choices. You ripped the painting up and threw it away, or you cut out the good part, saved it and got rid of the rest. I had a lot of friends that did that. Sometimes they said they're going to make a collage. They're going to glue all these good parts together and it should be a winner. Of course not. No relationship. But anyway. Okay. I think that's my last slide.
Okay. Well, this is where we have all your information. What I'm going to do is I'm going to unmute everyone so we can kind of have a conversation. But, like Marilyn said, she's just outside of Nashville. So if you ever get down that way, just try to reach her. And I wish I had done that a few weeks ago myself, but I just didn't think about it. I was just traveling the state of Tennessee. And you're right, Marilyn. I looked for the art museum and there was only one on the main street there. And it was just a kind of a rotating show that was in at the time. And I go, well, that's not much of a museum. But I thought maybe I just didn't know where to look, but because I always look for museums. But let's see. I'm going to try to unmute everybody. I'm going to turn the slide off here. Stop sharing and stop recording. I think we're good here.